Club. Every 2 weeks, we hear from speakers who tell us about their inspirational stories, expertise in their field, or are finding innovative solutions to our world's most pressing challenges. My name is Jane Kwan, and I am president of this club. This week, we have Sue Fisher, who will talk to us about emergency preparedness. A little about Sue. She graduated with a degree in biology from the University of Chicago and received her master's in environmental studies from Cal State Fullerton. Before coming to CSUF in 1991, she worked in Seattle for 6 years doing cancer research at the world-renowned Hutchinson Cancer Research Center. She served at Cal State Fullerton's Radiation and Biosafety Officer for 18 years before assuming her current position as the Emergency Management Coordinator in the University Police Department. She is also an occasional lecturer in the Kinesiology and Health Science Department, is involved with several county and statewide emergency management committees, an International Emergency Management Association member, and a certified Red Cross first aid and CPR trainer for professional rescuers. Without further ado, here is Sue Fisher.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the invitation to speak to you today. Most people are not really clear on the concept of what really emergency management means. It seems like almost contrary terms. So what I'd like to do now is just to talk a little bit about really what emergency management is. And I'm going to start with a couple of examples. And I think they're fairly timely. I'm sure everyone has heard about these. So I'm going to switch this over to a presentation. Oops. Share? There we go. Can I move that?
Yeah, if you drag on the top black part.
There we go. Technology. All right, so there I am. Oops. No, it doesn't want to. How do I move
Click
forward?
on the top. Yeah.
Oh, there we go. Okay, I think the key thing is, why is emergency management important at all? And it's because things do happen, and we can't always predict when they happen. We don't know when they're going to happen, but nevertheless they do. And the key thing is you don't ever want them to harm you. So the way that you can do that is by being prepared. I'm sure that everyone saw the pictures and really sympathized with the horrible things that happened in Paradise, California, and the surrounding areas, the small communities around Paradise. On November 8th, a very small fire that started in the morning very quickly, literally within a few hours, roared through in the entire community of Paradise and the surrounding ones, and did a tremendous amount of damage, as I'm sure that you've seen by some of these photos. Overall, there were about 30,000 people that had to be evacuated from that area. Sadly, 85 died, and there are still 11 that are unaccounted for. In that area, there were 150,000 acres that burned and about 19,000 structures. So a lot of those structures, that seems like a really large number, but remember, it's a whole community. So it's houses, it's businesses, it's sheds, it's barns, it's everything that could possibly catch fire in that area did. And it was really quite devastating, as I'm sure you've seen by these photos and others. But also shortly after that, on November 3rd, there was a very large earthquake that occurred in Anchorage, Alaska, 7.0. And most people don't realize how really geologically active Alaska is. It's the most seismically active state in the United States. They regularly have 6 and 7 magnitude earthquakes pretty much on a monthly basis. This one got a lot of attention because it struck in a very highly populated area of Anchorage. One of the things that happens in earthquakes is liquefaction. And so the pictures you see here are the result of liquefaction. What basically means is that the soil itself has a lot of water, so there's a very high moisture content. So like Jell-O, when you shake that, it shakes actually quite violently and much more than the surrounding surfaces. And so that's why you see the road that was completely mangled by that very hard shake. And the other thing that happens in earthquakes is that things fall. They fly through the air, they break. Fortunately for the Anchorage earthquake, no one died, but there was still a tremendous amount of damage that occurred. And when you look at these photos, these should be the reminders, is that we live here in Southern California in earthquake country. And actually there's an awful lot of places all along the western coast that are in seismically active areas. And so when you look at these pictures, these are the kinds of things that actually could occur in your house, in your workplace, in your school. And so you should put that in your mind when you're creating a workspace or when you're putting things on a high shelf, that these are the kind of things that actually can fall during earthquakes. A lot of the things when we talk about preparedness seem like they're an insurmountable task. So what can I really do? But I think the key thing with anything that seems difficult or maybe unpleasant is simply to start. And you try to get yourself prepared because you don't know when something's going to happen. And we certainly know that there are dangers that exist around us. And so you can do something about it. And part of that is just advanced planning, and it's not difficult. So for example, I'll give you the, sadly, what we see much more often than we ever should is situations where someone with a gun shows up and starts shooting. Actually, right before the fires that occurred in Ventura, there was the shooting at the borderline cantina in Ventura. And I mean, those are situations that are extraordinarily sad. And you go and you think, well, what can I possibly do? Well, there are some things actually you can do every place you go at every time. When you walk into any room, whether it's the mall, whether it's a grocery store, wherever you're at, motels, think about the exits. If I had to leave very quickly, how could I do that? So looking around. So making a kit is a really easy thing to do as well as a part of the preparedness plan. The kits typically are the kinds of things that you would put together that if an emergency were to occur, what would I need in my house? And if you travel at all, and most people travel substantially around Southern California, you spend an awful lot of time in your car. So what kind of things would you need in your car or even at work or school? For example, if you were driving to work one day and there was a major earthquake, and you understand what the traffic can be around Southern California. So imagine yourself now surrounded by hundreds, possibly thousands of cars, and no one's going anywhere. So those are the kind of things you need to imagine. What are the kinds of things that can happen in your area? There are lots of resources out there on how to make a kit. In the prepare.fullerton.edu website, that's a website that I have created and maintained, there's a lot of information on how to prepare there. Through the federal government, through FEMA, there's ready.gov, and then locally there's the Southern California Earthquake Country Alliance. So scec.org, there's an awful lot of information specifically on earthquakes at that particular website. And then making a plan. What would you do after a disaster? Do you have plans to meet your family or your friends, particularly in the neighborhood or even where you're working? Where would you get together to make sure that everyone is safe? Additionally, local lines oftentimes will go down or will be impacted, but you may be able to call outside your area. So make sure that everyone in your family has the same phone number, the same person, that everybody calls, let's say, Aunt Bertha in Oklahoma, to make sure that everyone calls there. And so that's one place where you can all check in and make sure everyone's safe. There's an awful lot of training that you can do, and it's not difficult. And hopefully everyone really takes the opportunity whenever they can to be trained in first aid and CPR. The American Red Cross, as well as the American Heart Association, both offer classes pretty much in every community where you can get those courses. You're usually certified for a couple of years, and the skills that you gain in both of those are really invaluable just for everyday living as well as emergencies. And then if you have a CERT organization in your city, CERT stands for Community Emergency Response Team. Pretty much any city across the United States, and almost everyone in California, every city, has a CERT organization. So think about getting trained. Oftentimes there's little or no cost to those, but the value of that is you're really learning something about your own city, your own community, so that when a disaster happens, you know who can help you and who you can help. But I think the most important thing is, and this applies to everyone, I think we've gotten into a world today where we are much more engaged in the other things in life. We walk around and we are looking at our phones and we're engaged in other things. But I think the key thing to make sure that you're really prepared for whatever is going to come to you is to really to pay attention at all times while you're walking, while you're driving, particularly when you're crossing a street, looking around. When you walk into a new establishment, whether it's a mall or whether it's a restaurant, looking around, look at your surroundings. Who is there? If you're going to an airport, looking at the people that are walking in and out, see if there's anything that seems unusual for you. Knowing all of your routes and exits wherever you go. And the key thing, and this is something that we have found has actually interrupted an awful lot of really terrible things, is by someone observing something and saying to themselves, gosh, this doesn't seem right, and reporting it to the authorities. So it's that see something, say something technology, but or saying, but that really does make a significant difference. And it's astonishing behind the scenes how often that has really prevented some really terrible events. So there's an awful lot of things. Look around your community, look around at the things you do, where you go, what can hurt you. And then you try to prevent it. It's the same thing if you were going to go camping. What are the things out there that can hurt you? Are there bears? Are there snakes? Is it going to be very cold? Is it going to rain? All of those things that you think that might hurt you, same principle applies. What would you do to prevent being injured? So you're simply prepared. And I think on behalf of a parent, and I think on behalf of an awful lot of other people, is that you really do it because someone else really cares about you and they want you to always be safe. So think about that whenever you're going somewhere, whether you're traveling or whether you're just going to work, that you want to be prepared to end up wherever it is that you want to go, in that place, that you end up safe and you're healthy and you're able to go home at the end of the day. So that's sort of the key thing, the key message that I would like to get out to everyone, that it's not really difficult and it's actually fairly easy to be prepared. So I'd be more than happy to take questions.
Great, thank you so much. Does anyone have any questions before I start it off? Okay,
yeah,
go ahead, Anna.
I have a question. I know you put the link to the emergency kits in your presentation, but what would be like a few of the most important items that we should have? Like I live in an apartment and I'm just I don't have an emergency kit, so I don't even know really where I would get started or where I would store something so large. So I'm trying to think like on the smaller side of what should I have?
It's a really good question, and it's really where everyone needs to start. And if you think about it, let's say you're going to be gone for the day. Let's say you're going to go to the beach. What would you take with you? Chances are you would take something to drink, right? You'd have like a couple of bottles of water. You want some sort of snack. You'd probably take some, maybe a blanket or a towel that you're going to lay on the beach. It's the same kind of thing. What would you really need? And if you think about the most important thing that you're going to need, particularly in any emergency, it's going to be food and water. Starting with some type of, even a 6-pack of water, whatever it is you can start with. And you can put it in a duffel bag. You can put it in a backpack. You can start with something very simple like that. I always recommend the easy thing to put in there for food are candy bars or granola bars. I always like to put something in my kit that I'd actually like to eat. There's an awful lot of things out there that are, they have a shelf life of 10 years. Well, that's great, but chances are you're already stressed and in an emergency. So I always revert to those things that I really want to eat. So you can put things like that, just something that's relatively shelf stable. And then the other important thing that even putting a small first aid kit, and it doesn't have to be anything fancy. Literally, it could be some roller bandages and some gauze and a few variation size of Band-Aids. Those are really easy things to put in a kit. Flashlight, obviously, but anything that requires batteries, you want to make sure that you either have extra batteries or you have some sort of device that you can actually recharge the batteries. But those are the really basic things that you want to look at, but it's not difficult. You just have to start.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I definitely think I need to start somewhere. And so I think that's a good place to start. But I do have a quick follow-up to that. What about, for example, like documents like your social security card or like passport? Like how important are those things to grab, like in an emergency?
The best thing to do really is to leave your emergency kit someplace that's relatively secure. And then if you can make even a copy, some sort of photocopy of those things, even if it's nothing more than writing down your social security number and maybe putting a photo of yourself. And then if you have pets, putting a photo of your pets in there, because if you get separated, it's an easy way of identifying who you are. Things like your rental insurance, writing down that number, who is your agent, and what is the insurance number. So there's some really basic things, and it doesn't have to be complicated. I always recommend as well is putting it all into a Ziploc bag so that it's somewhat waterproof as well.
Oh, yeah, that I've never heard of before. Thank you very much.
Good.
I actually have a question. So this was like maybe 10-ish almost years ago, where Yorba Linda had a huge fire, and my entire cul-de-sac actually did burn down except for my house. And I remember driving past like the hills that were inflamed, and that's something that I still really remember. And so when I hear about fires in California, it really kind of hits home for me. I was curious if, like, when an emergency, especially like a forest fire, especially Southern California nowadays, it seems to happen every year. What would be, I guess, the most important thing to have or to know about kind of getting yourself into a safe place in particular scenario?
Well, I think the key thing that we've all learned from many of these fires, and sadly with the change in the climate, we're going to see more of them, and we're going to see more devastating fires like we saw in the Camp Fire. But I think the key thing is that knowing how to get out of your neighborhood, what are all the routes, and then making sure that you are connected to your county emergency or city county or city emergency notification system. Again, if you go to the prepare.fullerton.edu website, I actually have some links in there, and you can find how to get connected so that when the city or county sends out a message, you get that message. But I think the other thing too is that for various reasons, sometimes people don't get those messages. So paying attention, having the either your phone on or listening to the news. So when you hear about the conditions that are possibly forming, don't wait till the last minute. If there were something nearby, don't wait for that call to evacuate. You really don't want to see the flames before you're really driving out of the neighborhood. And some people, for good reasons, really don't want to leave their home, and you understand that. But it makes it very difficult then when everyone at the last minute decides to try to leave, because then you have a lot of congestion. So again, a lot of the advanced planning, think about how you're going to get out, how quickly can you get out, what are the alternate routes that you can take. And if you only have a limited number of routes, then you might want to think about actually starting your own evacuation before you're even called to. The other thing you want to make sure that you do too is that you've got plans so that if you're not there, if you have a pet or something at home, that someone else can also be able to go in and get your pet and rescue them and take them out of the evacuation or out of the danger area, even if you're not there.
Perfect. Thank you. Do we have any other questions?
I have a question. I was just wondering about the CERT classes that you had mentioned. Is it something that's hosted by the city, or is it like a specific organization that you'd have to get certified through?
As far as I know, they're always hosted by a city because they are community emergency response team. Oftentimes the city itself hosts them, but oftentimes there are several people, for example, from the fire department that actually teaches a lot of the courses. But go to your city's website and type in CERT, and or it might even be in your county. I know in Orange County, for example, we have several cities that have CERT organizations. So even if your own city may not have a particular CERT organization, there might be a nearby city that actually does. But they're really great courses to get some really basic information on how to prepare for disasters and how to respond.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Perfect. Any other questions before we end our meeting?
I had a question.
Okay.
Besides the Fullerton website, are there any other websites that you think that have valuable information regarding emergency preparedness? Because I'm in HR, and one of our task that we have throughout the year is providing safety meetings on emergency preparedness. So is there any websites that you would recommend?
Yes. Obviously, FEMA has an awful lot of information. So they're just, the FEMA website is the ready.gov. But also, if you look at the American Red Cross, you can actually look through the state of California, Cal OES, the Office of Emergency Services. They have an awful lot of stuff. Sometimes if you just type in emergency preparedness, you will pull up an awful lot of sites. I would just be a little cautious because anyone obviously can post anything on the internet. I would steer towards those organizations that are already established, but there's a lot of really great information out there. And certainly getting involved even in your city, you might actually have some really great resources there as well.
Perfect. I know you need to go, so I want to be mindful of your time. So thank you once again, Sue, for being with us today. For everyone else, our next meeting will be December 19th with Yanancy Ho, who rollerbladed coast to coast, and we'll talk about how one girl can. We also have our secret snowflake reveal next Wednesday on the 12th on Zoom. And that concludes our Big West Rotaract meeting. Thank you for joining us. Meeting adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.